Welcome to the Frontline Herbalism podcast with your host Nicole Rose from the Solidarity Apothecary. This is your place for all things plants and liberation. Let's get started. Hello, welcome back to the Frontline Herbalism podcast. I hope you are enjoying this mini-series about herbal support through repression. Today I'm going to be talking about herbal care packages, and I hope this will be interesting and useful for people who are, for example, herbalists or kind of wanting to do this sort of work, or just, and I mean like herbalist in like the absolute broadest sense, not this like super UK hyper medical herbalist person, but just like anyone in love with herbalism who's making medicine for their community. I'm going to talk through my sort of herbal care package system, why I chose certain plant medicines and certain ingredients, like how it works logistically, how I organize it. And yeah, maybe it will inspire some folks to request a care package. And yeah, hopefully it will inspire some folks to, just do something similar, because that would be fucking awesome. All right. And yeah, I've got a little bit more about this in the Herbalism and State Violence book in terms of some of the recipes and things for like the different components. But I'm going to get stuck in. Just a reminder, this coming week is the Week of Solidarity, International Week of Solidarity with Anarchist Prisoners. I'll put a link in the show notes. And absolute shameless plug, the Herbalism, PTSD and Traumatic Stress course is coming soon on the autumn equinox, like 22nd of September. So please join the waiting list if you're interested. It's no one turned away for lack of funds. So really incredible course. I only offer it twice a year. Absolutely sliding scale, just dives in so much to like herbalism and working with nervines that support the nervous system and medicine making and trauma and the politics of trauma and all the things. So please don't miss out if you're interested. And yeah, let's get on with the show. All right, so I'm going to be talking all about herbal care packages. So I'm just going to give like a little overview of the different care packages I offer, and we'll dive deep into some of the medicines that I've chosen and why, and then I'll sort of talk about like the back end systems of how and make this all happen with, lots of support from other people. So one of the main focuses of the Solidarity Apothecary is making and distributing plant medicines to people experiencing state violence. And I used to have a system where people would kind of just put their details through a form and share a little bit about themselves and their needs. And every different project got a different package. And it just was a lot of work from my end, if that makes sense. It involved a lot of communication. People that weren't familiar with plant medicines might not always know what could be helpful. And yeah, with having my baby and just my capacity for working and organizing in this way, like really reducing, because obviously I'm working all the time as a mum, but I just needed a system. So I will talk about the systems in more detail, but the basic thing is that I've got these online request forms using software called C-Table, and people can request certain care packages. They can put in their details if anyone's got any meds, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, I'm diving into too much detail already. But basically, I decided to design specific packages for specific people based on years and years of experience of sending similar things like this to folks around the world. And my experiences with projects like Ukraine Herbal Solidarity and other things. So yeah, my different care packages are, I've got an anti-repression herbal care packages. So that's for defendants, like people involved in cases who are experiencing state repression and their supporters. For example, if people have been arrested, they're like awaiting for trial, for kind of close family members and comrades doing like anti-repression work. And I'll go into the ingredients, the things I put in that soon. So like one big focus of people experiencing state violence are people experiencing repression in this kind of like politically organized way, I guess. They're involved in some sort of work for liberation, and as a consequence, they have been arrested and maybe charged or not charged, and are just dealing with the kind of consequences with the state. I then have like a prisoner family herbal package. So this is for people supporting someone inside, whether that's like a family member, a friend, partner, a comrade. Like I use the term family like really kind of broadly and expansively. And it's also care packages available for like ex-prisoners. I do a lot of, I used to before Lee, before Lee, my baby. I used to do a lot more one-to-one support with people leaving prison. Now, it's just I don't have as much capacity for that, but the care packages can still go out to people who have just got out of prison, for example. I know, after 20 years of prisoner support, how fucking hard it is, like how emotional the phone calls are, how tiring the prison visits are, and just kind of the nervous system impact of that kind of chronic stress. So that's another package that people can request. And then I have a Hunt Sab herbal package. So for people in England and Wales and Scotland, they'll know that we have like fox hunting by the fucking landed gentry here, pretty much. But people still go out in this country on a Saturday and murder foxes for fun on fucking horses with dogs. And it is brutal and violent. And I love foxes. Like they're my animal. Like I just adore them. So people go out every Saturday and sometimes on weekdays to sabotage the hunts, to pull the hounds away from the fox, to cover the scent of the fox, all sorts of things. But it's like very physically demanding, getting up really early, sometimes walking like miles and miles and miles. I remember walking like 20 miles with a ruptured appendix that I then went to hospital for the next day. Classic stupid Nicole pattern of like going at it too hard. Anyway, wrote a book about it, overcoming burnout. Anyway, but it's for people sabotaging hunts and also who sabotage the badger cull in England. So there's this fucking horrific cull that kills thousands of beautiful badgers that allegedly give TB to cows, which is just nonsense and like not proven. And they just get shot and trapped and shot. And people fortunately go out in the middle of the night and trash traps and interrupt the shooting to try and like protect these beautiful animals. So that is also really hardcore on the body. It's like intense sleep deprivation. It's really cold conditions. It's like walking miles and miles in the countryside, getting damp. So it's a care package for folks working in those conditions, and I'll talk about the medicines shortly. And then I have like a grassroots group herbal package. So this is like a little bit more generic in the sense that like this is for groups organizing for like human, animal and earth liberation in like different ways. And that could be like a trans pride crew, that could be an earth first gathering, that could be like groups that are like fighting police violence, like that. It's just like, honestly, like I've got a list on the page of different groups who've received a care package over the years, and there's still like loads of people I haven't added to that, and other people that are anonymous and stuff, but that kind of care package is just for anyone contending with the challenges of organizing, like campaign, chronic stress, repression, things like this. And then lastly, I have a like site of resistance herbal care package. So this is for people living at sites of resistance, like protest camps and land occupations, mobilizations, things like this. So people are obviously dealing with, cold conditions, often with like difficult environmental conditions, like, wind, rain, all the things. Often lots of repression and violence from, bailiffs and police and things. And then, just like camp dynamics, like how the fuck do you manage, group dynamics and drinking and all the things and all the chronic stress. So I know I've known so many people like live in these environments that have really struggled. So this package, contains, again, different things. So all of these care packages go out to different groups and people request them on the form. And I will try and talk a little bit at the end about fundraising and enabling this work as well. Okay. All right. So that was a little overview of the different packages. I'm now gonna go into more detail about the medicines that are involved in the different ones. And, many of them have the same things. So that's why it's easier to talk about it all at once. So yeah, I'll start with the anti-repression herbal package. So this contains an immune tonic, a nervous system soother blend, a lavender oil, and a nerve nourisher tea. And I'll go into these. So yeah, the immune tonic is basically a mix of, so I guess it's worth saying that I do two different versions. I do a version that contains tincture, which is herbal medicine with alcohol, normally vodka, sometimes grain alcohol, and also glycerites, which are medicines made with glycerin. And I've got a whole fucking amazing online course all about making herbal medicine with glycerin, just FYI. And I find the blend is just like delicious, like the tincture and the glycerin. However, so many community members don't drink alcohol or take alcohol-based medicine. For example, like in Calais, we don't use alcohol-based tinctures because like most of the people we're seeing in the clinic are Muslim, for example. But also, people in recovery, like children, won't have alcohol. Elders are often super sensitive to tinctures, as are many immunocompromised people. So I like to have the availability to request like alcohol-free medicine. So anyway, so the mixed one contains echinacea tincture. Echinacea is like a fantastic acute herb for immune support. So there's kind of like first stages of infection in terms of like preventing like a cold getting worse or, being prolonged. Elderberry, just elderberry season at the moment, just fantastic antiviral, super nutritive, broad spectrum antimicrobial as well. Thyme, which I do as a glycerite in the slow cookers. So yeah, thyme is just, everyone knows thyme, like a wonderful antimicrobial immune supporting herb. Ginger, because it's like super warming, it's like fantastic for the cardiovascular system, really fantastic obviously for colds, also things like nausea. And turmeric, which just makes the most amazing glycerite. And yeah, again, all of these are like immune supporting herbs. And I find just this blend is so fucking delicious, basically, and really, really effective. Like I get so many messages from people that are like, oh my God, I was coming down with this cold and then I took this and blah, 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 and I feel so much better. It's a very like tried and tested recipe. And I think for people that are like enduring sort of like chronic stress, but like maybe like a acute short-term wave of it. For example, they've got like a 2-week court case, like having a little sip of immune tonic through that 2 weeks is going to really help them not to get really sick from stress. Okay, so that's the immune tonic. And then I have a nervous system soother blend, which is all with glycerites. So this contains hawthorn berry. Hawthorn is just the most amazing kind of gentle relaxant, like supporter for the cardiovascular system. Chamomile, which again is also a very gentle, wonderful relaxant, fantastic for people's guts that go a bit wonky with stress. Lemon balm, also amazing for gut health and just a wonderful nervine kind of uplifting of the mood. But I've like specifically chosen these nervines because they are very, very safe. And I will talk about safety, I think, as its own section. But like the advantage of sending a care package out to someone is that you're not doing like a really extensive intake call, for an hour or 90 minutes and then writing notes and researching things and doing your list of herbal recommendations. And, it's like a lot of energy and time. This is like kind of more like generic support. I do screen for medications like in my request form, but generally I find at this quantity, this little 125ml bottle, I might come back. Something might happen in the future, but generally this amount of medicine with these like super safe herbs, like, yeah, you're fine really. Like I'm not losing any sleep at night, do you know what I mean about their impact? So yeah, I do find that they are received really well because they're such a gentle, relaxant action that can, kind of reduce this fight or flight response. So they're included. And then I include a little bottle of lavender oil, which I feel like I've talked about before on the podcast. Surely I have. But anyway, I buy olive oil from a place called Zaytun in in London who are a Palestinian-run co-op, and they bring in olive oil from the West Bank as a way of like supporting people in the West Bank and Palestine. And yeah, it's just the most amazing, high quality, beautiful olive oil. And then I infuse organic lavender with it, with just like a tiny dash of vodka as a preservative. But yeah, it's just fucking amazing. Like, I've never met anyone who's taken it and not just been blown away by how much they've been sort of knocked out in terms of sleep and just like supporting with relaxation. Like, yeah, I could go on about this lavender oil all day, but just like the body really needs fat and oils and healthy oils, and putting them on topically is just a part of traditional medicine all over the world. So yeah, I love to put a bit of lavender oil in a care package. And I also love that like connection to Palestine, and especially with so many people requesting care packages who are involved in resistance in various groups and things like in the UK and other places. Okay, and then I have like a nerve nourisher tea. So this is a blend of skullcap, chamomile, oat straw, and lavender, specifically to help people kind of rest and recover after sleep. And skullcap is like the only herb in the care package where like I'm a little bit cautious, because I personally find it like very, very sedating. Like I can't take it at the moment while I'm co-sleeping with my baby, because it will just knock me out for 12 hours. But yeah, I don't put loads of it in the tea blend. It's mostly chamomile and some oat straw and a dash of lavender and a little bit of skullcap. And I just find that kind of gentle hypnotic effect is really fantastic for people that have had like really intense days in court, who are really experiencing a lot of activation and finding it hard to relax. So generally in a pack, if it's like a whole group that's requested it, I'll generally put in one blend per person, like one immune tonic, one nervous system soother blend, one lavender oil, and then I tend to put in like a nerve nourisher tea for like the whole group, or a couple of packs for the whole group, just because like drying herbs is like such hard work. And I don't have enough land or whatever to grow skullcap, so I buy in skullcap, and it's fucking expensive. If anyone wants to help grow skullcap for the Apothecary, I would love you forever. But yeah, but I do like including a tea, because not everyone gets on with a glycerin and not everyone gets on with a tincture, and some people are just tea people. They just love that ritual of making a tea and drinking it. So that's what's inside the anti-repression pack. Now I'm going to go through the prisoner family herbal package. So I've already talked about the nerve nourisher tea, so that's the same as the anti-repression package, as is the lavender oil. In this pack, I also can bring in this rose petal soother. So this is basically like rose petal glycerite, and it is like fucking delicious and amazing, and just everyone who takes it cries, and it's so good for like that kind of heart medicine. I just find like people who are supporting someone in prison, like I feel like it affects the heart more than any other organ, like just because you miss someone, like you miss loving them, you miss having them around, like, yeah, it's just a lot of heartache. You're watching them fucking suffer like in an institution. So yeah, I just find this rose petal soother is like really, really special. I don't make loads of it because I've only got so many roses on my site and stuff, which is why I don't include it in all the other packs. Especially since having a baby, it's been so hard to do medicine making. But it's a really, really special medicine. And then in this pack, I also bring in a prison visit blend, which is very similar to the immune tonic as like a base. So it contains like echinacea tincture, elderberry tincture generally. I mean, these are also can be glycerites, turmeric, ginger, and thyme. But I bring in like a tiny little bit of like extra stress support. You've probably seen me on Instagram talk about how I don't tend to give ashwagandha or winter cherry to people with PTSD or like significant kind of like someone who's like very sympathetic dominant in terms of like in fight or flight a lot, but in fight or flight in a way that they're like extremely angry and activated and ragey and like hyper irritable. I find that like any stimulating herb is just like a fucking no-no in that case. And I know all the literature promotes ashwagandha as like calming and it will help with sleep, blah, 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 blah. But like, it's just not my experience. Like, and I'd love to hear other experiences of herbalists, but I just find it very stimulating. However, I include it in this blend because it is fantastic for this kind of HPA axis, this hypothalamic pituitary axis, this kind of adrenal response, like how the brain like tells the pituitary glands to, produce certain hormones like that the adrenal glands release, blah, 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 blah. Like it's a whole thing, I talk about it in the Herbalism and PTSD course in like much more detail. But basically like this kind of stress response, it does need some support. And I find kind of like a short-term, like microdose almost can be really effective at helping someone just kind of like maintain their immune system. Like it just gives you just like this extra bit of power for the day to get through a really stressful day and to feel more level-headed. Yeah. So anyway, so I think it's just like this little extra kind of like turbo power to get through really hard days. And like the thing about prison visits that people don't understand, maybe if you live in central London and you're just like hopping on one train or something, then maybe not as brutal, but like they're really like a whole day affair in the sense of like you have to get there at a certain time, put everything in your locker, wait around for fucking hours, get searched, have all this like adrenaline waiting for the visit, have a really emotional, difficult few hours where you just have like screws like overbearing on you, like, and then you have to say goodbye and it's all this heartache and then you have to get home. And like through all of this time, you wouldn't have maybe had a chance to eat well or have any sort of parasympathetic downtime. And then just most people like are not in prison, like near their loved ones. Like, I used to drive like all the way to fucking Derby and back, like 4.5 hours each way. Like it was absolutely crazy. So just, yeah, like they can really take their toll. And I think that's why this kind of like extra help is helpful, which is why I also include Shazandra, which is really, again, like similar kind of fantastic like adaptogen in the sense that it really helps with this stress response. It really helps with the liver. But yeah, basically these herbs really help with chronic stress and our adrenal systems and maintaining that energy without as much depletion in my experience. And you're really having this blend like of that day, like of that stressful day. You're not taking it day in, day out. Do you know what I mean? So the next care package is the Huntsab care pack. So I also include the Stamina blend, which is basically the same as the prison visit blend that I've just talked about. So the elderberry, turmeric, ginger, thyme, ashwagandha, and Shazandra glycerites. Yeah, and I think, I can't remember my ratios off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure I do kind of like bump up the turmeric and ginger and thyme because of this kind of like warming effect and this sort of antimicrobial support through all the kind of colds and infections and things when, you're stabbing the badger coal and it's just like unending darkness for weeks on end. I also include the nervous system soother blend that I've mentioned already. So that contains hawthorn berry, chamomile and lemon balm. And then in this pack, I also put in a kind of like fire cider vinegar mix. So, loads of people know about fire cider vinegar. It's just basic vinegar with loads of things infused in it, with just like buckloads of like warming herbs and spices. It might be like lemon and thyme and cinnamon and garlic and onions, like all the things. But yeah, it's very, very pokey, very, very warming. And yeah, people can just put a little teaspoon in some hot water, or just have it on food. Or if you're really wild, you can just like have a swig of it. I absolutely despise vinegar and I'm like very yeast intolerant because of living in a room with like black mold that I didn't know about for like 5 years. I think that's why. Anyway, so yeah, vinegar medicine isn't appropriate for everyone when they have this sort of dysbiosis of vinegar, of, like a yeast imbalance in their guts. But like for people that don't, who, really benefit from vinegar, then it's really fantastic. And yeah, it's just such a like pokey, warming addition, which I think is like perfect for Huntsabs. And then I also put in a muscle rub. So when you're sabbing, your body hurts, right? You're just literally walking for hours. carrying heavy rucksacks, like all the things. So yeah, I think a muscle rub's really nice. So I make an ointment with soy wax, comfrey. So like I make the infused comfrey oil, or sometimes I buy it, if I'm honest, when I'm very busy and overwhelmed. So comfrey is like really fantastic for the musculoskeletal system, for like, muscle repair and pain and all the things. And St. John's wort is like amazing, again, for the musculoskeletal system, for wound care, all sorts of stuff. But yeah, comfrey, St. John's wort and arnica oil. If I had the energy to do 3,000 squats, I would make daisy oil with our kind of native daisy here, because it's like a much more sort of sustainable alternative to arnica. But yeah, I'll combine those 3 infused oils with the wax, and then I'll add like wintergreen and lavender essential oils. And the recipe is definitely in the Herbalism and State Violence book, but it's a really it's a really simple muscle ointment, just super effective. Like we use it in Calais. That's where I learned the recipe from Louise, who makes all the amazing medicines, or like coordinates the medicine making for the mobile herbal clinic Calais. So that's what I put in the Hansab pack. All right, and the next package is the Grassroots Group Herbal package. So I think I've talked about all of these apart from the tea blends. So I tend to include 1 immune tonic per member, 1 nervous system soother blend per member, 1 lavender oil per member, and then I put in 2 tea packs for like to have when people are like together in a group. By the way, like I think it is nice to include something that people can have on their own, because everyone's got like a different body and they want to take medicine at a different time, and people live separately and stuff. So yeah, like it is nice to send big collective medicine to certain spaces when people are all in the same location, but when they're not, I think it is nice to like send smaller bottles like separately. All right, side point. Okay, so in this pack, I also add like a meeting clarity tea. So this is kind of mix of herbs that are both kind of calming and also some sort of like uplifting energy. So yeah, it contains rosemary, which is like, can really aid with concentration, help get blood flow to the brain, also help with things like grief and mood. Chamomile, which is obviously calming but in a very like gentle, subtle way, and is fantastic for like nervous guts, which people can definitely have in meetings. Peppermint, which is also very calming and bringing that kind of clarity and focus and concentration. And nettle, because nettles are really nutritive, kind of like they just bring that nourishment. And also I've got fucking nettles coming out of my ears where I live, so they're a nice like bulking herb that I can add to a tea blend that are just amazing medicine, and also just like abundant where I am and free, and all the things. And then I also include like a de-stress tea. So this contains chamomile, oat straw and lavender. So I haven't included the skullcap, but it's a really nice, gentle, nourishing, kind of calming blend, helping people shift into a more parasympathetic state. And obviously oat straw is really like nourishing and nutritive to the nervous system. So that's what's in the Grassroots Group pack. All right, and then the Site of Resistance pack. So these are like the more flexible package, in the sense that it's like very specific for the request. So I'm trying to think of a recent one. For example, folks in the Hambacher forest in Germany, where it's like a very long-term like forest occupation, which unfortunately has been evicted, but then like several new sites keep popping up in the forest because it's like a massive area. So people are living in the trees and like resisting the deforestation and destruction of the landscape for fucking coal mine. I think could be, I'm pretty sure it's coal there. So so it's like I try and design these for people's needs. So kind of gauging like how many people are there, like what's like the flow of people, is it like lots of visitors or lots of long-term people, and then just kind of getting really specific things out to them that they need. But generally it the things that I'll contain, like the pack contains, are immune tonics, which I've talked about already, the muscle rubs, which I've talked about in the Hansab bit, and then I'll generally add like a elderberry syrup, like our kind of cough syrup recipe that we use for Calais. So this is like a really fantastic mix of a kind of glycerite blend of elderberry with some cinnamon, fennel seed. And yeah, I'll often add elecampane, which is like a more kind of drying, expectorant kind of warming herb in there as well. Sometimes there's a decoction. Anyway, it's like me, but yeah, I'm sorry, people are probably interested, but yeah, I'll boil up the elecampane in a pan to make a really strong tea blend basically, and then I'll combine that with marshmallow powder to make a really fantastic marshmallow gloop, which is like super soothing and nourishing for the kind of mucous membranes in the throat and the lungs. So yeah, I'll include that elderberry syrup. I've just noticed my baby coming up the path, so I'm gonna have to pause this here. All right, I'm back the next day. I just have to squeeze this in around the baby. So, okay, so I was talking about sites of resistance care packages and how they're like very bespoke. And yeah, I include these amazing elderberry syrups, which are really fantastic for upper respiratory infections. I also include the muscle rubs that I talked about in the Hunt Sub section. And then, yeah, in terms of like other things, I'll ask obviously the needs of people on the site. But I'll often include like a period pain blend for people who menstruate. So that's often cramp bark, because again, I have this incredible cramp bark tree grown on the land here. So I'm able to kind of make it in, you know, like a bigger quantity. And it's such a fantastic antispasmodic and smooth muscle relaxant. So it's good for all sorts of pain. I haven't found it that effective as a glycerite, but I still need to experiment with warm glycerites and cramp bark. But it's a really, really powerful tincture. But obviously not everyone on a site will consume alcohol. So I have to, you know, always ask that in my intake as well. I'll also try and include some sort of like gut blend or gut tea. So that might be for people who are experiencing kind of you know, like diarrhea or bloating, things like this. So it will kind of, yeah, be, you know, just a mix of all the you know, like chamomile and plantain and things. And yeah, sometimes it will be like a more bespoke tincture or glycerite blend. Obviously, like, you know, infectious diarrhea and things like this, bacterial infections are like pretty serious on a campsite. And, you know, I'm not into reporting things to the state, obviously, but sometimes if it's like, you know, a really huge camp or something, that might be like some kind of public health emergency. But on a smaller scale, it might be something that's happened while they're trying to get the infrastructure in place around toilets and hygiene and hand washing and stuff like that. So yeah, I'll often include things like activated charcoal, for example. But yeah, that's like a whole other podcast all about like acute illness and herbalism. And then I'll try and include like a herbal first aid kit, and sometimes there's a bit of back and forth. Like most sites will have some sort of basic first aid kit. Other times people don't even have, you know, basic dressings and plasters and things, so I will like just literally send them like a whole pack, like in a small rucksack or in like a, you know, some sort of bag with lots of compartments that are visible, so they've got, you know, sterile things for wound cleaning, different island dressings, different plasters, you know, different things they can cut up and then tape over to make their own kind of island dressing. If you don't know what an island dressing is, it's like basically, you know, those plasters or dressings that have like a square edge around them, and it's all about making sure the actual wound is covered, but there's also this kind of like, yeah, like it's an island basically, like it's more protected from infection. And, you know, just things like bandages and stuff. Like when we work in Calais with the mobile herbal clinic, like you will like dress and bandage like almost for the apocalypse, in the sense that like people are living in fucking horrific conditions intentionally because of the state and state violence. They could easily be living in accommodation, not in extreme temperatures and not with like so much like awful cold and weather exposure and pollution exposure. Anyway, but yeah, we'll always like seriously clean, dress a wound, and then bandage it. If someone's just, you know, hurt themselves at the site where I live or something, I'm not gonna like bandage them up. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of overkill, but it is important if you're living outside just to like be extra protective of preventing infection. So yeah, I'll often include dressing kits in there. I'll include some kind of wound sprays, like that could be like the one we use in Calais is a mixture of myrrh tincture, calendula tincture and water. It's really, really effective. I'll also include things that are like a little bit more gentle, like witch hazel spray or rose water, for example. And, I like to include some sort of like saline solution bottles that are like 100% clean, because obviously if you're making a tincture and stuff, it's not like sterile in that way, but it's good to have a wound wash. Anyway, I promise I will do like more detailed things about herbal first aid soon. But yeah, basically that's what's in the Sites of Resistance package. And like I said, it's very like needs orientated. Like there'll be a lot of communication between me and the person, and also making sure that person on site, it doesn't have to be the person who's requested it, but like making sure there is someone who understands like the herbal stuff. And normally if people are requesting them, they do. So it's like knowing, okay, what kind of dose do you need to give to someone if they've got period pains? Like, should they take a little sip of cramp bark, or should they take half a fucking bottle, which obviously they shouldn't. But I mean, yeah, I will know that from communication with someone, like where they're at in terms of, making those decisions. Like sometimes it is a herbalist who's like, kind of holding space at some sort of occupation, like when all the encampments began around the universities pushing for BDS, like boycott, divestment, sanctions around university involvement in, Israel and supporting the genocide in Gaza and things. So it was like, if a herbalist has requested them, we can be like a bit more geeky with each other of, okay, just what do you need? Let me get it in the post quick. And then they've got like a little dispensary at their camp that they can then support people with. Ideally, long term, I'd love to have more offerings that are generating more funds so that we could just like redistribute money, because sometimes, the herbalists do have access to medicine, and ideally you always want that local medicine and that local infrastructure. So it doesn't make sense for me to just like package up a load of shit and send it to fucking Canada when there's like loads of amazing indigenous herbalists running herbal projects who I could literally just send a donation to, and they could like prepare a bunch of stuff to send to a site of resistance. Does that make sense? But saying that, I know it is also nice receiving medicine. And yeah, every group is different. Like sometimes people need money because they want to buy things. Other times they want homegrown medicine because they want the solidarity and the relationship building. Again, like I've created packages to make my life easier, to send things that I can plan and prepare and like batch produce. But ultimately, like Frontline Herbalism is all about like responding to people's needs. And the last thing I would ever want to do is send a bunch of stuff that doesn't get used because people don't understand it or don't know how to work with it, or are like cautious with safety things. And because I don't have much time this morning, I'm gonna stop this podcast here, and then next week's episode I'm going to go into some of the things I wanted to go into with this week's episode. So I'm going to talk about how I produce things en masse for these care packages, how I post them out, things like labeling, safety information. Maybe I'll talk through some of the request forms so that if you want to do something similar, you've got a bit of a template. And yeah, I think I'll just leave it there for now. But thank you so much for listening, and take care. Thanks so much for listening to the Frontline Herbalism podcast. You can find the transcript, the links, all the resources from the show at solidarityapothecary.org/podcast.